Evaluation of outliers. Hi, I'm Jonathan Ross and I'm today's presenter. I'm currently the Associate Director of MSAT for Upstream Drug Substance at Resolute Bio. I have over 8 years of experience in the biotech field developing and characterizing processes for monoclonal antibody production. I received a Bachelor's of Arts in Biology from Willamette University and am currently pursuing a Master's in Applied Statistics from Colorado State University. I am also the Member Engagement Manager of the CMC Statistics Community for AAPS. Today's Stat Snack will discuss how to evaluate outliers. By the end of this video, I hope you have a better understanding of how to evaluate, identify, and handle outliers. Overview of outliers. An outlier is a data point that can be identified as unexpected, out of trend, or extreme. Outliers can impact the overall conclusions of a statistical analysis, and therefore it is important to understand if the data point should be removed from the analysis. Throughout this presentation, a variety of methods will be discussed for detecting, evaluating, and handling outliers. Evaluating outliers is a crucial step in statistical analysis. By examining and understanding outliers, statisticians can gain insights into data quality, assess the impact on statistical measures, and make informed decisions about their treatment. There are 6 main reasons to evaluate outliers: assessing data quality, impact on statistical measures, understand data patterns, selecting appropriate analysis techniques, outlier treatment, and sensitivity analysis. First, evaluating outliers assesses the integrity of the data. Outliers can indicate an error, a measurement problem, or data collection issues. It is important to understand the data source, collection method, and any potential biases in the data. By assessing the quality of the data, this ensures data accuracy and integrity. Secondly, understanding how outliers affect statistical measures such as mean and standard deviations is important. An outlier can significantly change statistical measures. It is important to investigate the underlying causes for these outliers. Thirdly, outlier evaluations helps understand data patterns. Outliers may indicate a unique or an extreme observation, providing valuable insights. It is important to understand potential underlying causes for such a phenomena, as they help explain the data or add to the analysis. Fourth, the presence of outliers may lead to a change in the statistical analysis method. It is important to understand if the outliers will impact the assumptions of the chosen statistical test. If the assumptions of the statistical analysis are not met, then one should examine whether a non-parametric method is more appropriate. Examples of non-parametric analyses include the Wilcoxon rank sum test, the Kruskal-Wallis test, and the median test. Fifth, understanding what to do with outliers is important. One needs to decide whether to remove, transform, or report outliers separately. When handling outliers, it is important to use caution and document sound justification for inclusion and exclusion of outliers. As a general rule, outliers are always kept within the analysis unless there is strong reasoning to remove them. Lastly, it is important to conduct a sensitivity analysis by evaluating the impact of outliers on the results. One way to do this is to perform the analysis with and without the outlier to understand the influence. If the same conclusion is drawn with and without the outlier, then the analysis is robust. Outlier evaluation requires an integrated approach of statistical knowledge, domain expertise, and critical thinking, and is a valuable step for ensuring an accurate analysis and reliable decision-making. Before assessing for outliers, it is best practice to check and confirm the data is on the appropriate scale. Data that is better suited for a log transformation that is not transformed will have data points that appear as outliers. Once this has been checked, statisticians use a variety of methods to determine whether a data set has outliers. These methods include visual methods such as box plots and scatter plots, numerical methods such as z-scores, and statistical tests such as Grubb's test and Dixon's Q-test. Numerical methods and statistical test usage vary between statisticians. However, all statisticians visualize the data prior to an analysis. The easiest way to identify potential outliers in the data is through visual representations or graphs of the data. It is important to remember that every statistical analysis should start with visualizing the data. Visualizations help identify trends as well as potential issues in the data. Creating visualizations first can also save time and effort in statistical analyses, as data transcription errors are commonly caught during examination of graphs. Some useful visualizations are box plots and scatter plots. Box plots are a simple chart describing the data. Box plots are created using the data's quartiles. A quartile is a chunk of the ascending ordered data. For example, the 25th percent quartile shows that 25% of the data is smaller than this point and 75% of the data is larger. A box plot is made up of a box, whiskers, and points. The box represents the middle 50% of the data, or the data between the 25th percent quartile and the 75th percent quartile. The whiskers are indicating the minimum and maximum values when excluding outliers. Lastly, the points are the outliers. Any data point is considered an outlier if the value is larger than the 75th percent quartile plus 1.5 times the interquartile range, or is smaller than the 25th percent quartile minus 1.5 times the interquartile range. Scatter plots are fairly easy charts to create, with the response on the y-axis and the effect on the x-axis. Outlier detection using a scatter plot is more subjective, as it is within the eye of the beholder to determine if the data point is extreme. When creating a scatter plot, it is important to correctly scale the axes. As seen in the example plot, the y-axis is scaled from 240 to 300, and the data point in the red circle should be evaluated as an outlier. If the y-axis was scaled from 0 to 1,000, the data would become compressed, and it is likely the scatter plot would not indicate any point as a potential outlier. There are several statistical outlier tests available to use. For example, there is the Dixon's Q-test and the Grubbs test. Grubbs test is typically used when the data set is small to identify single outliers, while Dixon's Q-test can be used for data sets of any size. Dixon's Q-test can also be used iteratively to remove multiple outliers. It is not recommended to use statistical outlier tests as a standalone analysis for the inclusion or exclusion of an outlier. One should use multiple methods and have sound justification for removing outliers. If using statistical outlier tests, using in conjunction with visual aids and scientific rationale. Using as a standalone test is not recommended. There are benefits and limitations to every detection method. Visual methods are easy but subjective. Numerical methods use a mathematical approach to quantify a range of expected values, but assume the data are normally distributed. Lastly, statistical methods provide a clear analysis for outlier identification, but also assume normality of the data, and the sensitivity of these methods decreases as the sample size decreases. Handling outliers. Once outliers have been identified, there are three options for dealing with them. One can keep the outliers, remove the outliers, or transform the data set. If one keeps the outliers, a sensitivity analysis should be performed to understand the impact of removing the outliers. It is also important to double-check all statistical assumptions. If outliers are removed, once again, it is best to run a sensitivity analysis to report the impact of removing the outliers to statistical conclusions. It is also important to adequately justify the removal of the data point. Remember, statistical evidence of an outlier from the Grubbs or Dixon Q-test is not sufficient on its own for excluding a data point. Scientific rationale should be used in conjunction with outlier tests. Lastly, double check to ensure the data is on the correct scale. If the data needs to be transformed, apply the transformation and double check for outliers. Data points that were previously outliers may fit into trend when transformed, and other previously in trend data points may be outliers post-transformation. From this bite-sized snack of statistical knowledge, I hope you were able to take away what is an outlier, how do I find outliers, and what do I do with outliers. Remember, evaluating outliers helps prevent erroneous conclusions. However, with large data sets, infrequent outliers have a limited impact on the analysis. To understand this impact, performing sensitivity analysis will help one understand how large this impact is. Thank you to everyone who has contributed to this video, and if you have any questions, please reach out.